Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at 1 Peter in our continuing study of the general epistles. Peter starts off, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who reside as aliens, scattered throughout, and then he mentions a number of places, Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who were chosen. And with that introduction, he begins, notice he's writing to a group of people in a particular area. As we begin to look at the recipients of this epistle, first of all, we notice some very strong Jewish elements that are found in the epistle. Those people to whom he's writing, they reside as aliens, and they are scattered. That term there, diaspora, it was actually a technical term that was used to talk about Jewish people that were no longer living in Israel. They were living anywhere but Israel. They're described as chosen. When we get to chapter 2, verse 9, we're going to see that they are described as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession. And that's a quote right out of Exodus chapter 19, what God had described of Israel. And so if that's all we had to go on, we would think this is a letter written to Jewish Christians. But there's more to the story. There are Gentile elements in this epistle as well. He says in chapter 1, verse 14, "Do not be conformed to the former lusts which were yours in ignorance." That doesn't describe Jewish people. That describes Gentiles. He says that your feudal way of life inherited from your forefathers. They didn't inherit a feudal way of life if they were Jewish people. That's describing Gentile pagans who had now come to Jesus. He says, "You carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousings, drinking parties, and abominable desires." That's chapter 4, verse 3. That's speaking to Gentiles. He says in chapter 2, verse 9, "You once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." And although those words echo with things that God had said to Israel back in the Old Testament, he's now speaking to Gentiles. And so the recipients of this letter are not just Jewish, there are also Gentiles in this mix. Now the epistle itself can be divided into three parts. The first section is a call to holy living. That's chapter 1, halfway through chapter 2. And then beginning with chapter 2, verse 13 to halfway through chapter 3, there's a call to submissive living. And finally, the big idea that we come to, although it's been suggested earlier on, when we get to chapter 3, verse 14, we have a call to suffering. And this is going to be the epistle, more than any other epistle, this is going to be the epistle that deals with Christian suffering. And of course, the reason that Christians suffer is because we follow a Savior who suffered for us. And so we're called to follow him, yes, even in suffering.